Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S IAS. Subscribe to the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS to get all the updates as well as materials.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services Examination. Today we have taken up daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th of April 2021. The articles which we are going to take up today have been displayed on your screen. Let us now begin the discussion with an important announcement.
And that announcement is that the first batch of Quality Improvement Program classes or QIP classes is set to begin on Monday. QIP classes are designed in such a way that they deliver the most important topics for the prelims examination of that year in around 50 hours. These classes will consist of economy, environment, polity, history, science and tech, and international relations. The next batch of QIP classes is set to begin on 3rd of May 2021. Let us now begin the discussion. The armed struggle that goes nowhere appears on page number 13, which is headed as Profiles on Sunday's newspaper. So the Maoist insurgents, despite facing desertions and counterattacks, stick to armed struggle and they continue to target security personnel. And according to the author of the article, the Maoist movement in India seems to be headed in a same direction that several violent and failed insurgencies inspired by the Chinese Revolution went, from Shining Path in Peru to the Communist Party of the Philippines. There have been although exceptions. For example, the Nepali Maoist managed to partake in power after peacefully ending the civil war, but these are just the exceptions. And in this particular article, the author traces the origin and the history of CPIM or the CPI Maoist, which is the main insurgent group in India right now. Now, if you have a look at GS3 syllabus, under it, there is a line which says linkages between development and spread of extremism. Now, the matters related to law and order and internal security are looked after by Ministry of Home Affairs, and it publishes an annual report every year. And this is a screenshot from the 2019, which is the latest report of MHA. And let us just look at the first paragraph of the report. It says, internal security issues in the country can broadly be categorized as follows: terrorism in the hinterland of the country, left-wing extremism in certain areas, security situation in Jammu and Kashmir, and insurgency in the northeastern states. So when UPSC expects you to be aware about the internal security challenges, these are the 4 internal security challenges which you should prepare for the mains examination. And of course, left-wing extremism appears prominently over there. UPSC has asked question both in 2015 as well as in 2018. In 2015, UPSC had asked, the persisting drives of the government for development of large industries in backward areas have resulted in isolating the tribal population and the farmers who face multiple displacements with Malkangiri and Naxalbari foci. Discuss the corrective strategies needed to win the left-wing extremism doctrine affected citizens back into the mainstream of social and economic growth. In 2018, UPSC asked, left-wing extremism is showing a downward trend, but still affects many parts of the country. Briefly explain the Government of India's approach to counter the challenges posed by LWE. And so keeping in mind these past year question paper as well as the syllabus, we are going to first understand what Naxalism actually is, what is its ideology, how due to the government deficit, due to various issues related to the constitutional and legal measures, it spread in so many states and districts in our country. And finally, since last 10 years, we are seeing a decline or a downfall in left-wing extremism threat. And so what government has done right in order to achieve this reduction in Naxalite activity in the central regions of our country. So let us now begin the discussion. Starting with understanding what Naxalism actually is. So Naxalism is a far left violent movement which aims to overthrow the government of India through People's War. So it basically wants to replace the Indian state through a violent and a guerrilla movement. According to the recent MHA release, it is currently impacting more than 80 districts scattered around 11 states in our country. So you can easily understand how widespread the spread of Naxalism is. Although it has decreased through time, but it is still prevalent in many areas. If we talk about Naxalism, from where does this word comes from? It comes from a village known by the name of Naxalbari in Darjeeling district of West Bengal. Because this whole movement is derived from there. Because in 1967, peasant revolt against landlords in Naxalbari village in Darjeeling district of West Bengal went out of control and police opened fire on them, and there began this violent movement, which actually claims to base its ideology on three important people. First is Marx and Engels, and the second is Mao Zedong. Now if we talk about left or far left movement, most of them derive their ideology from the same set of people, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So what was their actual ideology? So according to them, all social relations and state structures in an elitist or a capitalist society are quite exploitative in nature. And since they are exploitative in nature, they need to be replaced. And so according to Naxals, the current Indian state is based on similar capitalistic or semi-feudal setup. And so it needs to be replaced. But there are various ways of replacing a government or a state, but they talk about a revolution. Only a revolution can change this exploitative setup. And so, whoever bases his or her ideology on Marx believes that only a revolutionary change through active means can end this. And that means is provided by Mao Zedong, who led the revolution of Communist Party in China, because he gave the concept of guerrilla warfare, protracted people's war, a war led by the common people against the state, the war not in democratic sense, but war which is violent in nature, which includes surrounding the cities from countryside, political transformation through mass involvement, and finally, through these measures, overthrow the state. And so Naxalites base their ideology on these two things. And so whenever you read news articles related to some Naxalite activity, they basically deal with attack on prominent political leaders, paramilitary forces and police personnel because they want to overthrow the Indian state. But what is the reality of Naxalites? If you look at their overall activity, it seems to be that they are working against the interests of the people they claim to defend. They want to perpetuate their power in jungles through fear psychosis. They attack civilians and personnel from CAPF or Central Armed Police Forces. They carry out regular extortions, not just from the local people but also from industrialists. So although they claim to base their ideology on Marx and against capitalism, but they let the industries thrive as long as they agree to pay protection or extortion money. And so the question arises that under the constitutional and legal framework of India, which is considered to be one of the most democratic setup, how come an ideology like Naxalite not only emerged but spread into such a vast territory in our country, as you can see on the diagram in front of your screen? At its peak, it impacted so many districts and states in our country. An answer to that lies in government deficit, the inability or inefficiency of the government to cater to the needs and demands of the people, especially the tribal people, created a fertile ground for this kind of ideology, which ultimately engulfed a major region in our central parts of country. And let us understand those reasons one by one. But basically they can be categorized into four main reasons. Starting with lack of proper land reforms, lack of proper implementation of the provisions provided in the 5th schedule of our constitution, lack of forest rights being given to the tribal people, and atrocities being committed against people belonging to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Let us discuss them one by one. We know that the Constitution of India has created the provisions of the 5th schedule, which provide for alternate or special governance mechanism for certain scheduled areas in the mainland of our country. And in the 5th schedule, various special provisions have been provided for these specified scheduled areas, which among various other things include the constitution of Tribal Advisory Council in the states. And it also provides for some special powers being given to governor with respect to the legislations. Now this provision was created in order to protect the tribals in various states. But what has happened? What has happened is that there is a widespread nepotism in the way tribal advisory councils have been constituted. Although initially it was expected that for formulating any policies with respect to the tribals, the advice of Tribal Advisory Council shall be taken. But what happens is that since the influence of Council of Ministers is so immense that it creates problem at Governor and Tribal Advisory Council interface. And more often than not, the Tribal Advisory Council, when it is constituted, it is not a true representative of the tribal population of the state. And apart from that, there is a lack of clarity over the discretionary power of the governor. We know that according to the Constitution of India, the governor is to act on aid and advice of Council of Minister. But according to the provisions of the 5th schedule, governor can act on its own when it comes to the matters related to the scheduled areas. And so this has led to a lot of confusion, and in essence, the true purpose for which the provisions of the 5th schedule were constituted have not been realized. Then comes the matter of forest rights. We know that most of the tribals in our country reside in forested regions. And it is one of the main reasons for the spread of Naxalism as well. Because since the time of the Britishers, we have started to encroach on forested areas. It started with the British government. The monopolization of forests started with the enactment of various forest laws enacted in order to protect the forest. But in the process, we forgot that forest does not just includes the trees and the animals, but also includes people. And since the protection of environment and nature took precedence over the development of the people, there was no Forest Right Acts until 2006, when the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006 was legislated. And through this act, the rights of forest dwelling tribal communities and other traditional forest dwellers to forest resources and their rights were recognized for the first time. It was recognized that these communities live on forest, depend on forest, and it is very, very important to give them rights inside their own forests. But if you look at the provisions of FRA 2006, individual right status is decent, but there is minimal community rights, or community rights are not given. There is so much of insistence on evidence. For example, every tribal has to prove through an evidence that they are living in this forest traditionally, and only then their rights will be recognized. And we know that since time immemorial, they have been functioning outside the system which we have created ourselves. And so there is a lack of evidence, which ultimately results in the delay or lack of recognition of the rights provided in Forest Right Act 2006, which ultimately brews the frustration. Then there are atrocities being committed on scheduled caste and scheduled tribal people. We know that there is an act known by the name of Prevention of Atrocities Against SC and ST Act, but it was again legislated in 1989, but by then this problem had already grown. But even if you look at the implementation of this particular act, it lies in the hands of police officials, which again harbor caste prejudices. Ultimately, people sitting in most powerful positions in the bureaucracy and police also have the same caste biases which this particular act tries to fight. And so, the implementation of this particular act, especially in forested regions, has not been great. And then finally, the lack of land reforms. We know that widespread land reforms were carried out after independence, and it has carried on in some states or the other since then. But the land reforms were successful only in few states, for example in Jammu and Kashmir, Kerala and West Bengal. And due to the lack of the political will, most of the steps categorized under land reforms were either not implemented, or if they were implemented, they were not efficient or effective. And so that left the Indian society, especially in these regions, with a lot of landless people. So they don't have their own forests, they don't have land outside the forest, and so it became quite a fertile ground for an extremist ideology like Naxalism. So what is the current status of left-wing extremism and the activities related to it? So if you look at the data from 2001 to 2018, you can see that there is a persistent decline in the left-wing extremism incidents, which means the attacks being carried out by the Naxalites. As compared to more than 2200 incidents in 2010, it has come down to less than 800 cases in 2018, and this is the data given on the Ministry of Home Affairs. And so it clearly shows that there is some traction to the policies and the strategies being followed by the state governments and also the central governments. So all the states affected by LWE have taken their particular measures to suit their local requirements. But in this particular discussion, we are just going to discuss the approach of the central government and the steps taken by them. At the same time, it is important for you to understand that police and public order being the state subject, action with respect to maintenance of law and order lies primarily in the domain of the concerned state governments. Therefore, the policy of the Government of India is to effectively deal with the LWE insurgency primarily by capacity building of the state governments both in areas of security and development. So there is a clear-cut demarcation of the policy. The central government helps various state governments as far as security measures is concerned, and then it also helps the state governments in developing the areas on high priority which are impacted with LWE. So you can see that this is quite a holistic approach. And let us start by first understanding the security measures. First and foremost, outlawing the CPI Maoist, which is the major left-wing extremist organization responsible for most incidents of violence and casualties. And it has been included in the schedule of terrorist organization along with all its formations and front organization under the existing Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967 or UAPA. Then, government is taking active measures to strengthen the intelligence mechanism because central government cannot directly police the areas, but it can provide the intelligence inputs to the states. And so in order to counter the growing challenge of LWE activities, several steps have been taken to strengthen and upgrade the capabilities of intelligence agencies both at the center as well as the state level. This includes intelligence sharing through Multi-Agency Center (MAC) at the central level and State Multi-Agency Center at the state level 24/7 basis. These centers enable state and all India level coordination among various agencies involved in countering the LWE. Other steps which have been taken to strengthen the intelligence mechanism include setting up of Joint Command and Control Center at Gaya and at Jagdalpur, which will act as nodal centers to coordinate operation against the CPIM or Naxalites. Then we know that Naxalites take special advantage of the fact that there are limitations in front of the state police, and as soon as you cross the border from one state to another and then from that state to another, you can easily evade the action. And so that is why interstate coordination is a must if you counter LWEs. If you look at the border areas of Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Telangana, which is quite a hotbed for Naxalite activities, this is the main reason. Not only these areas are densely forested, but they also belong to different jurisdictions. And you know that police of one state cannot automatically pursue a criminal in another. And so, taking advantage of this fact, they keep on moving from one state to another. And for this, Ministry of Home Affairs keeps on conducting regular and frequent interstate meetings of not only bureaucrats, police officials, but also the Chief Minister for enabling a better response to LWE. Then we know that majority of casualties to security forces in anti-LWE operations are caused by IEDs or improvised explosive devices. The Ministry of Home Affairs continues to support extensive counter-IED capacity building efforts of state police forces to enable them to timely identify the IEDs and defuse them. And for this purpose, regular training programs are conducted by MHA. Then MHA has created India Reserve or Specialized Indian Reserve Battalion, acronymed as SIRB. The LWE affected states have been sanctioned India Reserve Battalions mainly to strengthen security apparatus at their level and also to enable the states to provide gainful employment to youth, particularly in LWE affected areas. Then there are numerous schemes run by MHA which directly provide advantage to the local police. For example, sanctioning of funds for fortified police stations under the scheme of the same name and carrying out of Civic Action Program or CAP, under which financial grants are provided to CAPFs to undertake various welfare activities in LWE affected areas. And the idea is that CRPF will go to an area, cleanse it from Maoists, keep it free from Maoists and then develop that area using the same funds. So these are the measures dealing with the security issue. But if we don't develop these areas, these gains will be temporary. And to make these gains permanent, there is a need to develop them as well. And for that also, a lot of schemes are carried out. But in this case, not all schemes are carried out by Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, in the beginning, we discussed how the acts dealing with the conservation of the forest and the nature created the main problem. And so, the Regulation of Forest Conservation Act 1980 have been eased in these areas. And now, it is allowed to divert the forest land for infrastructure creation dealing with the activities mentioned in the schedule. For example, construction of schools, colleges, telecommunication lines, drinking water projects, irrigation projects, creation of roads. For all these activities, the limits up to which a forest land can be diverted has been increased drastically to enable the development of these regions. Then, lack of connectivity is the major tool in the hands of Naxalites. They first disconnect the local population from the mainland and then they carry out their brainwashing. And so connectivity has been a major plank of the government of India. And the connectivity does not means road connectivity only, but it also means communications connectivity. And so the government of India has been implementing road requirement plan and road connectivity project for LWE areas. Also, installation of mobile towers has been on high priority of the government in these regions. Then we talked about how the lack of implementation of the provisions of the Forest Rights Act has created a lot of trouble in these regions. Now government is keeping the timely distribution of the titles or the land titles to the tribals on high priority in LWE areas. According to the recent data by MHA, around 15 lakh titles have been distributed so far, which means that so many people have got the legitimate right to reside inside the forested region. Then we know that various schemes of the government of India, for example, skill development, which is Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and many other schemes dealing with the rural development have a special focus on LWE areas. Similarly, Ministry of Education keeps LWE areas on high priority. For example, recently 7 new Kendriya Vidyalayas and 6 new Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas have been opened in LWE affected areas. And you'll be surprised to know that out of these, 2 new Kendriya Vidyalayas are to be opened in Gadchiroli and Kondagaon, which are the epicenter of Naxalism. So this is as far as the steps taken by the central government. But there are various unique schemes being run by various state governments. There are some unique surrender policies being run by various state governments, which has led to rapid increase in the surrender by the Naxalites. Similarly, there are some dedicated police force being created to counter LWE. And so let us know in the comment section what can be some important case studies to be cited while writing an answer in the mains examination. So this discussion is very pertinent from the perspective of GS3 mains examination, and this discussion we understood the idea behind Naxalism, how it originated, what were the deficits in our legal framework which actually gave rise to the Naxalism, and then finally what has been the government approach to counter left-wing extremism. Let us now move on to the next news. Another hint of new physics, this time from Fermilab, appears on page number 12, which happens to be Science and Technology page on Sundays. Now Fermilab, which houses the American Particle Accelerator, has released the first results from its Muon G2 experiment. Now there are a lot of interesting takeaways from this particular experiment. But before we proceed ahead to know the result of the experiment and its significance, we'll first have to understand the basics, because we also know that not all of the viewers and aspirants have taken up science in their graduation or even in their 11th and 12th classes. And so we'll begin right from the basics, and then finally we will try to derive the important conclusion of this experiment and what can be asked in UPSC Prelims examination. Now this article talks about a lot of fundamental particles, and basically it focuses on a particle known as muon, or represented as mu. But before that, let us just understand what are the basic particles which are taught to us at school level. So initially it was thought that an atom is indivisible. But as the knowledge of physics and chemistry grew, an atom consists of electrons, protons and neutrons. Electrons being negatively charged, protons being positively charged and neutrons being neutral. And for a very long time, people across the world and scientists believe that these are the fundamental particles, which means that you cannot get down to them, you cannot break them, these are indivisible. But with experiments, it came to our knowledge that even these protons and neutrons are made up of some even more fundamental particles or even smaller particles, which are called quarks. They always exist in groups, and when they combine in different combinations, we get protons and neutrons, which are called hadrons. So there are various types of quarks. One of them is up quarks and another one is down quarks. The up quark has plus 2 by 3 charge, whereas a down quark has minus 1 by 3 charge. So a proton is made up of 2 up and 1 down quark. So if you see, these 2 up quarks will contribute 2 into 2 by 3 charge, and 1 down will contribute minus 1 by 3 charge, making the charge as plus 1. That is what the charge of proton is. And similarly, if you look at neutron, neutron is a combination of 2 down, which basically means 2 into minus 1 by 3, and then 1 plus, which means plus 2 by 3, which makes the total charge as 0. So now we understand that even these protons and neutrons are made up of even smaller particles called quarks, which join to form hadrons such as protons and neutrons, which are components of the nuclei of atoms. Now the antiparticle of quark is antiquarks. Just like all the matter has an antimatter, even these quarks have antiquarks. Since there are 6 principal kinds of quarks, there are 6 kinds of antiquarks. Quarks and antiquarks are the only 2 fundamental particles that interact through all 4 fundamental forces of physics. You should pay attention to this particular paragraph. First, it gives you an information that there are 4 fundamental forces in nature, which can be directly asked in prelims examination. Which of the following are fundamental forces in nature? Gravitation force, electromagnetic force, strong interaction, and weak interaction. So it's easy to remember. You all know that gravitation and electromagnetism are forces, and you have to remember strong and weak interactions. And the important thing about quarks is that these are the only 2 fundamental particles that interact through all these forces. If you apply gravity on a quark, it will get attracted. If you apply electromagnetic field, they will respond to it. And an important aspect of quark is that it exhibits confinement, which means that the quarks are not observed independently but always in combination, as you can see in this image. You will never find a particle which will be made up of either a single up or down quark, but you will always find them in combination of 3 or more quarks. So this was about quarks, which make up proton and neutron. But what about electrons? Now, electrons come under the category of particles which are called leptons. They do not have any fractional charge like 1 by 3, 2 by 3. They have quantum charge. And in particle physics, a lepton is an elementary particle of half integer spin that does not undergo strong interactions. So if you remember, quarks undergo interactions and they respond to all 4 kinds of forces, but leptons do not. And there are electrons, muons, tau, and neutrinos. These are the 4 types of leptons. We already know electrons, and this discussion is going to be about muons, which are charged leptons. Just like electrons are charged leptons, muons are also charged leptons. And now let us focus our attention on muons, which are a heavier cousin of electron. We have seen that they belong to the category of leptons, but they are higher in mass as compared to electron. And as far as their occurrence is concerned, they occur naturally in cosmic ray showers and have been produced abundantly in the Fermilab experiment. So the results of the experiment which we are going to discuss right now, they are produced in great amounts in that particular lab, and apart from that, naturally they occur in cosmic ray. Like electron, muon has magnetic moment, because of which when it is placed in a magnetic field, it spins. So if this is the magnetic field direction, it will start spinning depending upon its magnetic moment. Now this is the most important paragraph of this particular discussion. As the muon spins, it also interacts with surrounding environment. So let's say that this is a muon and this is a magnetic field, because of which it starts to rotate or spin. But apart from this particular muon, there are other particles as well, which we do not know of. And as these particles pass by or they fly by this particular muon, they will have their own impact on its spinning, and so its magnetic moment will be altered by its interaction with these short-lived excitations. So scientists know a formula, they have developed a standard theory, and they can calculate the magnetic moment of this particular muon based on that. So they did that. So the calculated value in the standard model comes out to be 2.00233183620. That is okay. But an interesting fact is that when they observed it in the experiment, it came out to be 2.0023318. Now just focus on these last four digits. 41223620. But this might not seem to be a large deviation in our day-to-day life, but this is massive for a lepton level, for an electron level particle, because it shows that there are other particles, in this case marked with black color, which we don't know of, which we don't know that they exist, but they are impacting the spin of muon, and that is where the significance of this particular study lies. Because the standard model is supposed to contain the effects of all known particles and forces at the particle level. Now, if the observed G factor differs from the value calculated by the standard model, it could signify that there are new particles in the environment that the model does not account for. So a contradiction of the standard model or even a deviation from the standard model would imply that there exist new particles, and their interactions with known particles would enlarge the canvas of particle physics. So just because our theoretical value did not match with experimental value means that we even now do not know of all the particles, so there must be some other particles which are impacting the spinning of the muon. So what these particles could be? So these new particles could be dark matter particles, which people have been looking out for in a long time. And this is not just a single observation. Recently, beta decays at CERN indicates that effects of new yet unobserved particles and forces is being seen, and so this aligns with that observation as well. So what is the dark matter? So in 1930s, Fred Zwicky observed that many galaxies were moving faster than their theoretical calculations. Now this meant that there was something which we were not able to observe but was pulling these galaxies towards it. We could see some matter over there, but the kind of acceleration these galaxies had shown was not sufficient to exert the kind of forces we were observing. This extra matter, which was invisible and undetected, has been categorized as dark matter. It has not yet been observed directly. It does not interact with matter and is completely invisible to light and other forms of electromagnetic radiation, making it impossible to detect. But scientists are still confident that it exists simply because its gravitational force is being observed. So some of the scientists have predicted that these new particle or the something which is not detected, which is impacting the muon's spin, could be a part of dark matter. So from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination, it is very, very important to keep these basic stuff in your mind. Now this next article again appears on page number 12. Indus and Ganges river dolphins are two different species. So the researchers have studied ancient DNA that they got out of skulls and skeletons which were 20 to 30 to even 150 years old. And so the detailed analysis has shown that the Indus and Ganges river dolphins are not one but two separate species. Ganga river dolphin is a very, very important or key species as far as India's biodiversity is concerned, and it is not just important for India, it is very, very important for UPSC prelims examination as well. Consider these three questions, two of which you see on the screen and one will follow later. Other than poaching, what are the possible reasons for the decline in the population of Ganga river dolphin? Was asked in 2014. Construction of dams and barrages on rivers, which is obviously true because it fragments the population and it reduces the area through which they can reach out. Third is obviously true because they are mammals, they have to come up to the water level, they have to come above the water level to take the oxygen, and in the process they get themselves entangled in the fishing nets. Then of course use of synthetic fertilizers and other agriculture chemicals in the crop fields are increasing the pollution, and they are toxic for dolphins just like they are toxic for humans as well. Whereas increase in the population of crocodiles in the rivers is not true, because first, the population has not increased, and the second, there is always a balance between these top predators even in oceans, and so their population increase is not the reason, and so the right answer is 1, 3 and 4 only. Then in 2015, UPSC asked which one of the following is National Aquatic Animal of India. No points for guessing. Gangetic dolphin is the one which was declared in 2010 as National Aquatic Animal of India. Then in 2019 again, UPSC asked wildlife naturally found in. So you had to match and you had to find out which of the pairs have been correctly matched. So it was given blue-finned mashir found in Kaveri river or not, which is obviously true because it is naturally found in Kaveri river. Airavadi dolphin is found in Chambal river, which is incorrect because it is found near sea coast and in estuaries and rivers in parts of Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia, which is incorrect. Also, if you had known the name of Airavadi river, you would have known that Airavadi river is in Myanmar, whereas Chambal river is in the western part of our country, and rusty spotted cat is found in Eastern Ghats. And so the right answer was C, 1 and 3 only. Now you would wonder that are we supposed to memorize each and every cat, fish and snake found in our country? And the answer is obviously negative, because had you just applied your presence of mind, you would have known that Airavadi river is in Myanmar, and so Airavadi dolphin cannot be found in Chambal river, and so 2 cannot be true. And so let us just find out all those options which do not have 2. And so you have rejected A, B and D, and you were left with just C. Despite not knowing blue-finned mashir and rusty spotted cat, you still would have arrived at the right answer. So it is not possible to keep in mind all these species and where they are found, but more often than not, if you apply your presence of mind with some static knowledge, you will arrive at the right answer. And so far we have established that dolphin is very, very important for the examination which we are preparing. And so let us just first clear out a basic concept, which is difference between a mammal and a fish. So although dolphin lives in a water, looks like a fish, but it is not a fish, rather it is a mammal. And so what is the difference between a mammal and a fish? So all the mammals have mammary glands to nurse their young with milk, whereas fishes do not have those mammary glands. All the mammals have lungs for the exchange of oxygen, and they have blowhole to breathe air, and so that is where when they come up to the water level or the sea level, that is how they breathe, whereas fishes have gills to breathe in water. If you look at the flippers of dolphins and whales, you will have modified hand-like bones inside, whereas if you look at fins, they are totally cartilage inside. So these are the major differences between a mammal and a fish. And so what are dolphins? Dolphins are small toothed cetaceans, easily recognizable by their curved mouths, which gives an impression of a smile. There are 36 dolphin species found in every ocean. Most dolphins are marine and live in the ocean or in brackish water along the coastlines, but there are few species just like Ganga river dolphin or Indus river dolphins that also live in freshwater streams and rivers. Dolphins feed chiefly on fish and squids, which they track using echolocation. So echolocation is basically like a built-in sonar that bounces sound waves of prey and reveals information like its location, size and also the shape. And so a dolphin can make up to 1,000 clicking noises per second for echolocating their prey. So a group of dolphins are known as pods that can number a dozen or even more, and dolphins are intensely social animals that communicate with squeaks, whistles and clicks. Now it is still a matter of debate whether dolphins have language just like humans or not. And so just like all other mammals, they have warm blood and nurse their young. Dolphins have more than one mate and generally produce a single offspring that will stay with the mother for up to 6 years depending on the species. Now let us just look at the distribution of Ganga river dolphin in our country. And so this is the Ganga Brahmaputra region. You can see all the rivers. So this is Ganga river, this is Yamuna river, this is Chambal, this is the mainstream of Brahmaputra river. And you can see that in 1879 when it was first documented, the Gangetic river dolphin was found in all the tributaries and in the main rivers of Ganga as well as Brahmaputra. And now when you see in 2018, the distribution of Gangetic river dolphin has shrank drastically For example, the red streams show the presence of dolphin. So Ganga has dolphin, Chambal has dolphin, but the blue color now shows the seasonal presence, which means that the presence from here has shrunk, and so in this particular region dolphins are not always found. Similarly, in Ghagra and Rapti river it's not always found, in Damodar it's not always found, and so this shows the reduction in their population. And so what could be the reason behind that? Of course, main threats which still pose danger to the Indo-Gangetic or Gangetic river dolphin. So of course, for centuries people have hunted dolphins for their meat and blubber, but today their main threat comes from being caught accidentally in commercial fishing nets, as we have seen in that prelims question. Dolphins actually must rise regularly to the surface to breathe, and so in that process they become entangled in nets, leads to their drowning. Now this is for river dolphins, but what about marine dolphins? Now they are also being threatened due to climate change and global warming, which leads to warming of ocean temperatures, which has caused some of their primary food sources to move into deeper and cooler waters. Apart from that, marine heat waves have also caused a great devastation to the dolphins, because it has reduced their reproductive rates and ability to survive. And apart from hunting and entanglement, the river dolphins are threatened due to the construction of dams and barrages, which fragments their habitat and makes it impossible for these dolphins to move from one region of the river to other in order to hunt the prey. So if there are threats, what are we doing about it? So in order to summarize the threats for Ganga river dolphin: the damming of rivers for irrigation and electricity generation, which degrades the habitat and isolates the population; reduced flow of water in the river; use of synthetic fertilizers and other agricultural chemicals in the crop field; and getting trapped in fishing nets. And what are we doing about it? We are protecting it both at national and at international level. So, under CITES or Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, it is listed as Appendix 1. Now let us know in the comment section what does listing under Appendix 1 of CITES mean. And at the India level, it is listed under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which is the highest level of protection any flora or fauna can get. And also let us know in the comment section what does this listing means. So therefore, hunting of species and both domestic and international trade in this species and its parts is completely prohibited. Now so far, the Indus river dolphin and Gangetic river dolphin have been categorized as two subspecies under the same species. But the recent study shows that they are indeed two different species as of now, but this is irrelevant for our examination because this is just a research paper and not any confirmatory designation given out by international organizations or even by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Unless that happens, we don't have to worry about this particular So this last news which we have taken for today's discussion appears on page number 8. Indian Air Force to adopt new process to lease refueling aircraft. So the Indian Air Force, which is looking to lease mid-air refueling aircraft, will adopt a new methodology for the process based on the number of hours of availability per year as the criteria. Now this is not important. UPSC in the past has asked very straightforward and simple questions on some of the most prominent defense equipments which the Indian military, either Air Force, Navy or military is using. For example, in 2009 UPSC asked INS Sindhu Ghosh is an, INS Virat is a. So basically you had to recall what these are, and since this particular article talks about IL-78, which is a refueling aircraft, it becomes important for us to discuss some basic aspects about it. So first and foremost, it is a refueling or aerial refueling aircraft. So what is aerial refueling, which is an in-flight refueling or air-to-air refueling, which is the process of transferring aviation fuel from one military aircraft to another during the flight, as you can see on the screen. Now why is it needed? It is needed because the receiver aircraft can be topped up with extra fuel in the air, and so air refueling can allow a takeoff with greater payload. Because greater the payload, smaller is the flight length, which could be either weapons, cargo or even more personnels. The maximum takeoff weight is maintained by carrying less fuel and topping up once airborne. So you take more weight as you take off, and in the flight you keep on refueling with the help of aircrafts like IL-78. So, India's refueler fleet currently comprises 6 Russian made Ilyushin 78 tankers, first introduced in 2003, and now are facing maintenance and serviceability issues, because of which Indian Air Force is looking to rent some of the mid-air refueling aircrafts.